Hey, welcome back. This is another episode of Tales from the Stash. Basically, usually I show this in a basement, but my son's taking a nap right now, especially after a 15-minute fight. He was in the pool outside today, and now it's thunderstorming, or it was thunderstorming, so he's down for the count. So, welcome back to Tales from the Stash. I got something cool to share with you here. Hasegawa's 148 scale F4E. I think this is the third boxing, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of history on the Phantom, so I recommend Googling it. Yeah, I can function today. It's been a long day so far. The day's not even over yet. So we'll talk about this a little bit. I'll give you a quick hit on the F4E though. The E version was a result of the harsh lessons learned in Vietnam. Found out that you still need a gun in a dogfight. What they did was originally they added the gun into the nose. Now the reason why they added it in the nose is because even though it is the only place where you can really put it. So it was a harsh lesson learned for the United States Air Force during the Vietnam conflict. They did put the gun pod underside of the Phantom, but it didn't quite work out. It still had its troubles here and there. Mostly vibration and swaying of the centerline pylon, not really hitting the target. So, into the nose it went. But this version was also not just the most numerous, it was also the most exported. Greece, Turkey, Israel, Iran. Greece, Turkey, Israel, Iran. There was a couple more. South Korea. Japan license built it. The E version, but with, simplifications. And Germany ordered almost a similar variant known as the F, which say for a couple of differences. Like I said, Google it. We'll leave it at that. Now, as for the kit itself, the kit's actually a really, really nice kit. Even though it was molded in the 80s, and during that time, Hasegawa was trying to get all the variants of the F4 Phantom out. Sorry, just checking on my son. They were trying to release all the variants of the F4 Phantom. Unfortunately, it wasn't all universal, or even... It was modular, but it wasn't all universal. There's still a few things that they had to... It's still a slight difference. Like, you got the thin wing Phantom that they put out the B in the end. It was the first release. Had raised panel lines, didn't quite get everything accurate. Same thing with the J. Even though they retooled the J to make it easier to swap wings with the E version, which I'll talk about later. And of course, they also made the British Phantoms, and they finally released the entire series by releasing the Recon Phantoms, which was pretty cool. And I actually have one in my stash. So we'll talk about this version right now. Like I said, I think it's the second or third boxing because they did give it some updates. And they also added, at least in the third boxing, they gave you a one-piece canopy, which was a nice touch, instead of trying to tackle the four-piece canopy, which was difficult to begin with. So, without further ado, on with the kit, and let's talk about this a little bit. So, let's pop up the first sprue. Now, this is specific for the E version, or the F, or even the G. And the reason is, of course, like I said, the fuselage is a little bit different as compared to the fuselage is different, so slightly different, mostly in the front. The rest of it, universal, save for a few things here and there, like a ram air turbine and stuff. Anyway, this is the reason why. Here's the scoops are different here. The only difference is you just put the piece on it. Here's the part of the fairing for the gun, and they also had to modify I almost forgot. Yeah, they had to modify the landing gear, nose gear door for this version, which you can see here and here, as you can tell here. Of course, with this sprue, these are the intakes used, by the way, folks. This is for in case you want to give the option of using AIM-4 Falcon missiles. I wouldn't recommend it, because as far as I know, the E only carried the Sidewinders and Sparrows, which is quite a bit of missiles for the time. But to be fair, the Phantom was originally intended to be for the U.S. Navy, which was a fleet defense interceptor. Let's see, chaff and flare dispensers are put on the wing pylons, boarding ladder if you want to try to cut your teeth in doing that. Bit of probe antennas here and there. Here's the speed brakes, landing gear doors, as you can tell here. The molds are pretty old. These go back to the 80s, so it's got a little quirks here and there, but overall, the kit's still pretty good. It's still a very good kit, and it does lend itself to, like, there's tons of aftermarket parts available, and it's very forgiving. So if you want to do any scratch building, you can if you want. It's a pretty, like I said, it's a pretty decent kit. Here is the wings right here. This is for a slatted version. If you wanted to get a non-slatted, you've got two options. You're either going to have to go with buying an F4EJ, which is not easy to find here in the States, or you can swap wings with Hasegawa's F4J kit. So you can build that as an S and use these wings, or you can build it as a regular J, depending on what you want to do, but we'll talk about that a little later. Back to the wings here. I'm going to be discussing little pointers here and there, though, on this kit as I go. Now, even though this is for the Air Force version, it does have a couple of parts if you want to choose to build it as an S. So but we'll talk about yeah, okay. Anyway, to build the Air Force version, make sure you remove these, the trunnions. Make sure you remove the antennas. Don't remove all the antennas. The reason why I say this is because if you do your research, they might have certain antennas on the E. I don't really know for sure. And the F4E actually had quite a bit of modifications throughout its production run. So check your references accordingly. But otherwise, it's pretty easy. You just glue these onto here. Leave these alone. If you want, like you said, you can build this as an S. If you take these wings and put them on their Navy jet. But since you're building the E, don't use these. These are for catapult hooks. Use these since they were always land-based. And don't use these. These, once again, Navy version. Keep the short wing fences on. Otherwise, it's pretty decent. It's a pretty nice kit. What did I knock off? Oh, just a pin. Anyway, that's the wings itself. Here is for the nose, right here. This is a nice option if you choose it. You can use the short fairing or the long fairing, depending on which glues onto here. Now, depending on the area depicting or time frame, everything is optional. So you just check your references accordingly. And since I was talking about how the second boxing introduced this, the F4E later in its career got this style tank. This is actually an F-15 fuel tank, usually, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, I lost my train of thought again. It's been a long day. Day's not even over yet. So you can go with this, but if you're building an earlier F4E, or you're doing one from a foreign country, which I'll talk about, and I mentioned about how some of the parts do share in common with the Hasegawa kit. Not all of them, but some are universal with all the Hasegawa Phantom kits. Here's the fuel tanks here. As you can tell, these were actually from the original B and N and J kit, which they released in the early 80s. So you see the raised panel lines as compared to the rest of the fuselage on the E version, or the retooled J version. Actually, you find these are retooled J version. Raised panel lines. You want to rescrap them? You can. I wouldn't. If you're building Vietnam, go with this. If not, go with that. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But if you don't want to go with these wing tanks, you can always go with these. You don't want to go with centerline tank at all, you can go with that. Don't know what this is for. I'm sure somebody will point out to me. Of course, this has the Air Force style wheels, as you can see here. There is a difference between the Navy and the Air Force and their main landing gear tires. Weapons are pretty generic, though. It is a Hasegawa kit. You're going to have to use the weapon sets. These are the AIM-7 Sparrows, so you can stick with these. What's my train of thought again? Okay. So these are specifics, because there's no slots on the underside of the fuselage, so these fins are missing. And if you're going to use these for another kit, you may have to do some scratch building or something, or cannibalizing, which I've been known to do. Of course, once again, Air Force version. This has got the slotted stabilator since it's the E version. I will say this, depending on what production block you're building, Some had the arrowhead reinforcement plates, as you can see here. Some didn't. Check accordingly. They're pretty easy to remove. You just sand off, rescribe. Here's also from the older Hasegawa Phantom kits, especially the C and the D. You have these style missiles, and you have these style pylons. Once again, you can see the raised panel lines. Carefully, let me move my head back. Unfortunately, I got a big giant floating Mardi Gras parade head. These are supposed to represent the A9J, N, and P version. Not really, but you can always clean them up a little bit and modify them, as long as you got the reference material to represent that version. Doesn't take much. And of course, last sprue, don't use these. Use the ones on the fuselage. These are, once again, a carryover from the older. Those are a carryover from the old Hasegawa releases. Of course, you can get away with this. You can get away with that. These are okay. This is cockpit tub here. It's kind of plain. This is the ejection seat here. You can always scratch build more details in the ejection seat, or if you don't want to do that, you can always go with the pilots here. This is actually good news because they don't add pilots anymore like they used to for model kits. Monogram always gave you that option of using a pilot or not. Hasegawa still does, which is a nice touch. And that's basically how the cockpit tub goes. Here, some parts here. Here's the clear parts. This is what I'm talking about. I keep these in the bag with good reason. There's your one piece. There's your fourth piece. Of course, clear parts like gun sight, landing lights, and a couple other dots here and there. So, and since this is a decal sheet, I talked about this in research, which was my workbench journal video. This is actually the standard sheet for the second and third boxing. I think they did a fourth boxing, if I'm not standard boxing, if I'm not mistaken. Here's the instructions. Instructions right here. And it's General Hasegawa. Nice view. They come in gatefold style here. You know, they explain everything clear, concise. They show you what you got to do, what you don't. Certain marks. They show symbols like cut, cut, decal. Yeah. Modification and stuff. They're clear. They're concise. Color callouts are for Gunslinging or GSI Creos Aqueous Hobby Color and Mr. Color, which is the acrylic lacquer. If you have pretty easy to follow. If you have the proper cross-reference material, you got somebody who knows colors, shouldn't be a problem. This is the colors and markings. Be wary of these. I don't know if I read these wrong or they printed them erroneously for the color callouts. But the European 1 scheme, I think they had the pattern is reversed, and it doesn't help with this. The European 1 scheme, sorry about repeating, the pattern's reversed. It's still the same basic colors though. So if you have a color guide, ignore the color guide, but pay attention to the decals placement. But if you have a color guide, go with that. Just stick with the decal placement. The decal sheet is actually represented for the Missouri Air National Guard, which is here, 30 years of Fabulous Phantoms, and of course, where I grew up in the state of New Jersey, from McGuire Air Force Base, the 141st Tactical Fighter Squadron. This version either has European 1 with Hill Gray, which is the Hill Gray is similar to the F-16, whereas the European 1 was the thing during the early mid-'80s because of focus on World War III in Europe during the Cold War. Otherwise, if you don't want to use the decals, of course you don't. Decals are nicely done. They're thin, they're register, they're opaque. Just be careful when you're applying them because they can be delicate. Hasegawa has been known to have temperamental decals. Now, a few things about this kit. It's a very nice kit. It's old. It goes back to the mid to late 80s, but it's a really, really nice kit. I do highly recommend it. Until somebody else comes out with an all-new F4 Phantom kit, probably Zukai Mura or Academy finally comes out with theirs. This is the kit. This is it. This is the only kit that's a nice kit of the F4 Phantom. You can actually build most of the production blocks in this, depending on what year. You may have to do some scratch building. You might have to do a little bit more modifications. Their 1/72 scale kit has that. This doesn't. So you're going to have to check your references accordingly, of course. So check your references, as I said before. It's the cockpit. It's generic. It's okay, but it's not great. And there are a few things specific to the E version, specific to the EJ version, and specific to the F. And especially if you're building a later Greek or Turkish or even Israeli, you may have to do your references, you may have to get some aftermarket stuff. So that's going to be a lot involved. Fortunately, there's tons of aftermarket available. Good starting point, simple cockpit. Cockpit's it if you're not happy with the cockpit. If you want to make it look a little better, you can always get aftermarket ejecting seats. I have a True Details cockpit set, which is specific for the Hasegawa kit, so I will be using that in this one. The burner cans are a little plain, but like you said, you got to keep this in mind. This is during the 80s, so this is not compared to 2018, where you really don't need much in the terms of detail. You can only mold so much in the terms of detail during that time, and at that time, it would have jacked up the price considerably. The other thing I will point this out with this kit. They didn't drop the pair of flaps on the rear. Monogram did this with their C and their D and their J, but they didn't drop it on the Phantom. So you're gonna have to modify that. You may have to cut it out, which wouldn't take much. Just some patience, a sharp knife, and you should be good to go. Trying to think what else. Like you said, this version, but overall, it's a decent kit. It really is. It's a very good kit. You don't need to use decals if you don't want to. There are plenty of aftermarket decals. There's plenty of aftermarket sets. The burner cans are kind of on the plain side, which I got wandered off to begin with. They do make aftermarket burner cans. High Flight, they're no longer available, but you got Aries, I'm sure there's a couple others, probably like Wolfpack resin and the like. There are specific versions, like Wolfpack resin does make parts specifically for the South Korean F4 Phantom. I'm sure Cast or Isra decals, as they're called. I'm sure they have parts specific for make an Israeli F4 Phantom, which is known as the Kernaz in Israeli service. You can always do that. There's plenty of aftermarket cockpit set. I like the True Details in a black box because the black box isn't available anymore, but I have a feeling that they took the black box and put it in the True Details. It's generally accurate for the Phantom for most of its career. If you're not happy with that, you can always go with the Aries F4 Phantom cockpit set. That's a challenge. Be careful with that. Verlinden had a detail set had a really nice detail set for this kit. If you're not happy with any of those, you can always go with Photo Etch. Edward has a set. I think Airwaves made a set at one point or another, but Edward's the way to go. They have a big edition, or they have a little, like a Zoom set, starter set for this, and all you have to do is just scrape off the detail and put the Photo Etch in its place. Pretty simple. I think that's about it for this kit. I built about 6 of them. It goes together very well. Major trouble spots, of course, is the major challenges with this kit in general, with any Phantom kit, is actually there's a slight gap between the joining of the fuselage sections. All you really need is a little bit of plastic card, or if you're really good with putty. Sorry about that. Lost my train of thought. I do recommend scribing lights under the intakes, because even though Monogram remembered that, Hasegawa didn't do that. But I'm sure there are Photo Etch parts for that. A couple other things. The exterior set from Edward would be very handy for the Hasegawa kit, because this way you can always add slime lights, you can always add other odds and ends. And otherwise, this kit's really nice. It's a good kit. As I said, until Academy or Zakai Mirror comes out with one. Air conditioning, by the way. It was hot and sticky today. It's Jersey. 4 seasons all the way around. But otherwise, it's a decent kit. It really is. It's a good starter kit, but it's also a good starting point for like a super detailed project. Like Verlinden or whatever else. So, this is what I got for now. Hypermodeling, take it easy, and I'm going to go keep an eye on my son, even though he's right next to me. I figured I had time, and he's probably going to be waking up a little bit. So, hypermodeling, take it easy, guys, and hopefully talk to you again soon.